Welcome to the Glazier Nation podcast, where we uncover the best stories and the best practices of the glass and glazing industry. Whether you're a seasoned vet or just starting out your journey, this show's a great place for entertainment and a deeper understanding of our industry. I'm your host, John Spellman, and I'm truly honored to take you beyond the glass. Welcome back, y'all. Glazier Nation podcast, episode 42. My guest this week is Carey, CEO of Mountain Movers. And I don't want to set expectations too high, but this was a really great conversation. We talked about the glass industry. This is the Glazier Nation podcast, but we talked about some different aspects of the industry. We talked about Kevin's personal journey and how that might help other people with their journey. Really had a blast chatting with Kevin. Hope you enjoy the podcast. The Glazier Nation podcast is sponsored by Glazier Nation. You can check out all their offerings at glaziernation.com. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or other marketing opportunities, go to glaziernation.com/marketing. And if you have questions for me or you know someone that would make a great guest for the show, you can contact us on any of our social medias at Glazier Nation Podcast. First off, Kevin, how did you find the glass and glazing industry?
Sure. So it's always a wacky story how people get into glazing. I love hearing those stories from folks that we hire or talk through at different events and all that. But my story starts with my father. So my father is a union caulker, was a union caulker on the south side of Chicago. And so he was a subcontractor to the glazing business, and I didn't really fully understand all that until adulthood. But I remember as a kiddo, he would have side hustles on the weekends, and every now and again, probably because they couldn't find a babysitter or something, I would be his helper, and I'd be the one circling his ladder and picking up backer rod and giving him supplies. And I thought it was just the coolest thing ever. Not because it was glazing, because I was hanging out with my dad. You know, it's my hero. So it's like, anything you want to do, I want to do. And so he's the one that introduced me to the glazing business. Construction has been something I've been doing for over 21 years, which I kind of wince when I say that. It's been kind of a while. I'd say most of that has been in the glazing business. And quite honestly, I was trying to get out of construction. You know, it was always the fallback. You know, as a kid, I didn't say, man, I want to be a construction worker when I grow up. I sure hope that pans out really well. It's kind of something that when all else failed, I would find my way back to it. So framing houses, roofing, insulation. There was a lot of different odd jobs I did in construction. And I went to college, and after I graduated, I'm like, all right, no more construction. And nobody was hiring. And my dad got me an interview for a small glazing outfit on the south side of Chicago for an office position. And so went in there, interviewed, ended up getting the job, entry level, and kind of just put in a corner. And, you know, you're an estimator and you eat what you kill. So if you sell some, you become project manager. And I'm like, I don't even know how to read drawings. So Where do you start on this? And it was one of those typical sink or swim deals. But the cool part in that story is over the years, eventually I was able to hire my old man as a caulking subcontractor on the work that I was PMing. So it was a pretty cool opportunity to work with my dad and give him work.
That's a really common theme that I have. I knew it about myself, but I've really learned it from this podcast, is everybody that is second, third generation, there's always some similarity of, I tried to leave the industry, or I didn't think I was going to be in the industry. And myself, I was trying to be there was a point where I was snowboarding and bartending out west in the mountains and didn't really know what I was going to do with that. But eventually kind of decided to grow up. And what I knew was glass and glazing stuff. So slid right back into there. And honestly, like it's been great. It's like, it's what has afforded my family to be able to do what we want. It's how I've met a lot of amazing people. Now that all escalating towards my original question of Mountain Movers. So where do we go from? Is that before or after hiring your dad?
Ooh, that's definitely after.
Okay.
And that you got to back up into a faith journey there in order to answer that question.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I lived in Chicago or the suburbs of Chicago up until 2010, and my employer at the time decided to branch off into Texas and I got called into his office, the president's office, for an opportunity to move over into Dallas. And they were opening, and the big kick, I was a PM at the time. He wanted me to switch to the dark side of sales and business development. And I wasn't really down for it, but I trusted him, and I didn't know anybody in Dallas, and figured I'd take the leap. And so that was 2010, very unsaved in 2010. Didn't know God, didn't have a relationship with God. And, I thought work is what was moving me to Texas, but I think God knew that I was pretty stubborn, had a big ego. So I need to be close to the Bible Belt in order for him to get on my radar type of deal. And so a few years in, started hanging out with Christians and people that put God first. And I thought I was a little weird at first, and started following people to church and attended my first church service. I thought the preacher was a salesman after my money. I thought the music stunk, and I just wanted out of there. But quite honestly, I was chasing a girl, and a girl got me going. And so I'm very habitual, though, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Sure.
And I just kept going with her because I wanted to hang out with her. And then I started realizing, man, this guy's actually got some leadership style to him. I'm picking up some nuggets to implement at work. I kind of like this. And time after time after I'd show up, it was starting to work on my heart. And I didn't need her to be going in order for me to go. And then I had the one service in 2012 where even during the worship music, my lips started quivering. And, I'm Mr. Hard, Southside Chicago guy, never going to catch me crying. And the start of music is starting to make me cry. And I'm like, man, this is awkward. And then the message was the message to me. There's hundreds of people in this service, and they were only talking to me. And the pastor asked for, if this message was for you, the call to Christ, raise your hand. And I was up. There's 2 tiers in there, and I was upper level. I could see people looking up at me like, "Hey, we know it's your turn, bro. Raise your hand." It was a pretty tremendous moment. And so raised my hand, put it right back down. Didn't stick around to talk to anybody afterwards, but it was cool to talk to some of the folks that were working on me over the years that I was finally in the tribe. And from there's been some ups and downs. There was call it a newlywed season as a Christian where I was all in, and I didn't hit my deepest valley till 2014, which is a couple years after, and I'm happy to get into that if you'd like. But that faith journey started the mountain mover journey. And so it's rooted in Scripture, Matthew 17:20, have faith to move mountains. And it's just one of those sayings that just really stuck in my head, in my spirit. You could use it as a verb, you could use it as a noun. And it's just something that kept going with me through the years. And in 2020, we started a podcast called 1720 after Matthew 17:20, just to highlight people that are walking in faith in the construction business and highlight all those folks that maybe fell backwards into the industry, that there's a rewarding career that you can get from the industry. And it just kept growing steam. And there was like a movement, no pun intended, behind the Mountain Mover tribe. And over the years, through the podcast and through different leadership things that I've been doing, it really took fire to really become the purpose of my life. So it is the sun of my solar system, building an army of mountain movers, one person at a time. And whether that's work, home, how I serve, how I show up as a father, a husband, how I show up as a leader, what we're trying to create here at Mountain Mover Facades, it's all rooted in that purpose of, at the end of the day, just positively impacting people. And it doesn't matter what got you here, whether you fell backwards into it or you aggressively pursued the industry, because there are some of those that are out there that's what they wanted to do because they could see the professional side of things. We're here to impact you in a positive way, hopefully make a profound impact so you can make an impact on others. And that's the beautiful thing about exponential impact.
So I want to ask you a couple things there. First, I think maybe the obvious thing. So Mountain Movers is now also a glazing contract company, but it has not always been a glazing contract company, or do I have that wrong?
You have that right. So that's the latest thing to come on board. So I took that leap of faith along with some partners October of last year. So we're less than a year old.
Prior to being a contract glazing company, Mountain Movers was just this. Explain it for me.
Yeah, I mean, it started as just a saying. And like I do these daily motivation emails. I've been doing them for like 8 years. And I address the team, the tribe, the collection of folks that are subscribed to it as Mountain Movers, which really just started as direct reports that I worked with. And then my friends, over time, I would tell them about it in peer group meetings, and they're like, dude, BCC me on those. Those sound awesome. I want to be a part of them. And it just kept growing. That BCC list kept growing and growing. And then it just evolved outside of the company and just became a general thing. So there wasn't a company attached to it. There wasn't a podcast attached to it. But over the years, just one thing at a time kept attaching to this movement of Mountain Movers. That was the daily motivation email, the podcast. There's now a company that's Mountain Movers that is dedicated to the book, Mountain Mover Manual, and speaking and coaching and workshops and all that. And then the last thing to come on board is the most recent and most impactful is Mountain Mover Facades this past October.
Okay. And that's contract glazing.
Yes. Yep. So
All right.
We're a glazing subcontractor here in Dallas, Fort Worth.
The other thing, and I don't want to pry, you can share as much or as little as you want, but and I guess I'll share a little of why I'm curious here is the scenario you explained of moving south and being around Christians and going to church is it's almost eerily similar to what my wife and I are doing right now, where we've been in Florida for 10 years. We came from the Northeast, and we've met some friends, very, very good friends, very high quality friends, some of the nicest people I've ever met. And we've started going to their church. And my wife and I just aren't sure about it. There's a lot of stuff we love. There's a lot of stuff we love about it. And then there's just a couple things we're just not entirely, we haven't signed the contract, right?
Yeah.
So I followed that and I related to that so very well. And then you mentioned, you went through a newlywed phase and then 2014, like, I'm not asking for details, but like, explain to me what's that process? Like, what was the negative?
Yeah. And to address one of your earlier things, like the one or two things you don't like about it, like churches, there's a bunch of broken people like me that go to church. So there's a big time human element in that spiritual journey. And a lot of people can get turned off when they get burned by somebody that's going to church or claiming to be a Christian and all that. And that's going to happen. It's just knowing who God is and who he is to you and who you come from, in your faith journey. To understand that, the rest of it is kind of just noise. And that's really difficult. Like if you've been hurt by somebody through the church, or, maybe you don't like the structure of that church, it's just continuing to show up. Because at this point, I know in my spirit, I've seen God show up so many times in my life that I know he's real, because he's pulled me out of some crazy times and very specific scenarios. And I felt him in my spirit guide me to certain things that were pretty monumental in my journey. But to your question, I'm very habitual. I mentioned that earlier, and that could be a really good thing and a really bad thing.
Sure.
And all my life, and I give a lot of credit to my dad for the value of hard work and consistent hard work. I think hard work plus the consistency is such a force multiplier in your life. And I didn't even know at the time how much of a force multiplier it could be. Just, I'm going to show up and give it my all and probably focus on it to an obsessive level and then check out and then do my personal stuff. And so I was a partier, man. Like I partied hard. And I figured out when I moved here, my stories growing up in Chicago do not match the people that I'm rolling with now. When you start trading those, those bonfire stories, mine come to a screeching halt because they're not typical. And I didn't realize that. It's just how I rolled and who I rolled with on a weekly basis. Like, man, there was a lot of drugs, a lot of fighting, a lot of partying. It was normal. So Monday through Friday, hammer it at work, no matter what my job was. But then Friday through Sunday, it was game on. There'd be plenty of weekends where probably wouldn't even go to bed, and then just Monday morning back at it, 7 a.m., let's go. Construction time, whether that was in the field or the office. And that became normal to me over time. But you realize that that stuff, if you don't deal with it, it's not going to go away, even when you find your faith, right? So when I was saved, 2012, I started doing all the things, right? I served. Was going to singles ministry because I was single, so let's check that out. I became an usher. I started taking classes. I started reading the Bible. Like I'm just consuming. But that's like a checklist thing. I showed you my iPad before we started recording. Like I've been a yellow pad guy all my life. I want a to-do list, checkbox. Let's knock this out. So, I was doing the things, but I think I was losing sight of true relationship with God. And so as that newlywed phase of my Christianity started to wear off, the enemy and my bad habits started fading back in. And so had a slip up, and I can't think of specifics, like specific weekends other than the weekend, where I would party. And then if you're partying on the weekend, you're most likely not going to church on Sunday morning. And that would just snowball. And I got back in that routine in 2013, 2014 of working all through the week and then partying all weekend, and eventually had a breakdown April of 2014 where I was ready to kill myself. I was super high. I had a bunch of people over and everybody left, and I had a gun and I was ready to do it. And man, it took me to that level to finally ask for help. Like I had a fork in the road, and it was either ask somebody for help or kill myself. And that's where I was, and that's what I was facing. When you're as high as I was, like rational thoughts not working, right? I'm not thinking correctly. So I can only imagine how many people at that fork of the road takes the other turn, which obviously, if I'm talking to you today, I mustered up the courage to message a friend, and I was with that friend earlier that weekend. And he helped me check into a rehab facility in California. Disappeared the next day. Didn't tell anybody where I was going, other than my boss. So I had to tell him. And I was like, man, I got to do this. I completely understand if I don't have a job when I get back, but I got to go or I'm going to die. And so I ended up coming back after 3 weeks, and I did not tell a soul the story. I did not. Everybody was asking, like, where the heck have you been, man? And I would just say, oh, it's busy, hung up, meetings. I had these two tribes in my life. I had this amazing weekday tribe, and then this bring you down into the crab bucket weekend tribe. And so I was able to tell the weekend tribe I was just busy with work. And then the work tribe, I was also able to tell I was just busy at work, other than my coworkers, which that was super awkward for a while, and just time healed that. And I think it was pre-set up for, hey, don't ask Kevin questions. He's just been gone. Now he's back. Let's not address it. And I didn't really address it with many people until I wrote the book about 1.5 years ago.
And is the book, before we pressed record, we mentioned the concept of vulnerability. Is that kind of where you came to with your vulnerability, was through the book?
Yes, but not by design, which it's a total God moment. My mentor, Keon, told me, like, you have a book in you. I need you. You're a special dude. He just spoke all this life into me that, I don't speak into myself. I'm my own worst critic by a landslide. And he started laying out this vision for the book and what it can do for the industry. It wasn't about me. It was our industry needs more people like us stepping up and sharing. And he didn't know that story. And I wasn't planning on putting it in the book. So we laid all the chapters out, and it was just, goal stuff, habit stuff, routines, purpose, all that sort of stuff. And so the chapters there was a framework, a word outline of a framework. And then I go to church one day, and it's during worship music, and it's one of those few, and it's not the audible voice of God, but it was just a rifled message in my spirit. And it's in the middle of a song. So it's my wife and I in church. And God's like, hey, that story you're running from that you haven't told anybody? You're starting the book with that story. I get the chills just saying that right now. And I'm like, man, please tell me that word wasn't for me. Maybe this dude behind me is writing a book. Like, I wanted no part of that. but I knew it was him. It's been like 5 times in my life that I knew he was talking to me. And there was no turning back. And so the next thing I did, well, I obviously talked to my wife there, like, whoa, just had a profound moment here. And she's my ride or die. So, I mean, she's an amazing woman, amazing supporter, and she's got my back no matter what. So no matter what, she's in. And the next step was sharing that story with Keon, which, I'm sitting there like this, like fearful that like he might not even want to mentor me anymore. And that is a freaking lie of the enemy that I've believed for so many years, that I think a lot of us with our mountains believe as well, that we're the only one going through something. If somebody knew the skeleton that you had in your closet, they wouldn't talk to you anymore. It's all crap. That's what keeps us down. And so I explained this testimony to Keon, and I remember very vividly, he's like, dude, I've always had you right here. Now I have you here. And he was saying that he respects me even more after sharing this most vulnerable thing. And so that really struck a chord with me to, I guess, go into this no turning back mode with the start of the book with some confidence. But man, I don't credit myself of having a great memory. I forget why I walk in a room sometime. But when you start writing down an experience from your journey, at least this was my experience. It brought me back to that weekend. I remember facial expressions. I remember walking places, like very vivid. When you stop down and start reflecting and start writing things down, it takes you there. And man, I was weeping, like putting that down on paper. And it was tough, and got through it. And after the book was finished, like when we hit print, man, and I knew it was about to be published, I was so scared. Because all my clients can now see it. My vendors, my aunts, my uncles, my grandma, cousins. It's about to be everywhere. Anybody that wants to read it, it's about to be there. You know how many negative feedback touch points I got? 0. Not one. I mean, I had, quite honestly, I had people that were my friend during 2014 that were mad at themselves that they couldn't see it. They were frustrated that they weren't there for me enough as a friend, but that's not on them. I didn't allow them in. But they were just sad that I walked that alone. And I think so many of us, because we're that mountain of shame, that mountain of guilt, the anxiety and depression for sharing, like it holds us back from freedom. But there's a lot of freedom in vulnerability. There's a lot of freedom in honesty. And I know you have to be cautious sometimes because it can interfere with work and life or whatever, but you can find people that no matter where you're at in your journey, you can find somebody to talk to, whether it's personally or professionally. There's somebody you can talk to offload that stuff and work through with community.
There's a lot to unpack in there, right? And I suppose the way I'd want to bring it is the messaging to our industry, whether it's a installer, whether it's a project manager, what's your advice for somebody that's struggling, whether it's as dark as what you just described or whatever it is, what's the advice?
Yeah. So addiction and mental health and risk of suicide, both 3 mountains in my life, right? And the peak of my mountain is the peak of my mountain. And John, the peak of your mountain is the peak of your mountain. There's no comparison. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Well, that's nothing compared to what I did. That doesn't matter. It's when you're walking through it at that peak level, it's your peak. And the advice is, I don't care what you're going through, you are not alone. And we do workshops, and I promise you, it ain't for money. That we do Builder 2.0 workshops, and I do it with my mentor now, Keon, and we tee up construction like awesome buildings we get to build, right? Like great pay, great environment, but this is where you got to go to the bathroom. We show a picture of Porta, John. This is where you got to eat lunch, and it's a bunch of people lined up, kicked off the job. Yeah. And this is how you're treated. And then there's a slide of the stats that we're leading, and they're not good, man. Like, construction's leading, and this is beyond glazing. This is construction in general, because every trade's similar. Some are higher, some are lower statistically, but we're leading in mental health problems. We're leading in suicide. We're leading in addiction. out of hand. And it's predominantly because we're not sharing. We're not opening up. We're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, because I think the enemy wants us to feel like we're the only ones struggling with it. And you can't name a thing on this planet that you're struggling with that there isn't a group of people also struggling with it. So whatever it is for you, please, like, if you're struggling, open up. I'll talk to you. I don't care if you're a stranger, call me. Like, just get it off your chest, because the person that you share it with most likely is going to respect you a little bit more, because it takes a lot of courage. And so now I'm out there. Obviously we're recording a podcast right now, and I just spilled my guts. I'm getting more comfortable with that over time. And the reason I do it is because it gives the audience, it gives you, if you and I were just meeting one-on-one, it doesn't mean, hey, I went, now you go. That's not how that works. It just gives you permission. Like, you're safe. Like, whatever you want to share, like, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to love. And I think our industry needs a lot of, I know that word squishy and all that, but the industry needs a lot of love in it.
Well, that's kind of where my brain is. Those stats you threw out, is it, and that's probably a combination of all of the above, but the conditions, the job site conditions, the stress of construction schedules, and this is where I think it's a combination of all of the above, the image that construction guy, you said South Side Chicago, rough and tough, the image of construction guy is a tough dude, and all those emotional problems are for sissies.
It's a pot of all of that, right? So you got to remember, most of the problems that I had existed before construction existed in my journey, right? So I'm bringing things to the table, bringing brokenness. And for all those that walk backwards in the industry, most likely they are too. And then all of those tangible things you just listed compound that. So, man, I'm struggling. I'm at the brink of divorce. I'm at the brink of a mental breakdown, and I might be at the brink of suicide. And then this is where I got to go eat. And then this is how I'm getting talked to by my boss. This is how I'm getting talked to at the job site.
Yeah.
And we got to be a lot more empathetic, because you don't know what people are walking through. And if the shoe's on the other foot, how would you react? And so we aren't just creating these conditions, but we sure as heck are enhancing them with how we treat people. And I'll tell you what, that's why I would take all this risk to start this company. It ain't for profit, man. Like, I hope that becomes a byproduct someday. But the only way for us to make a tangible impact is sword on the battlefield, recruiting, finding people and loving on them, and showing them that this industry can be freaking awesome, and that you're special, and that we will unlock your weird talents and unlock your abilities, and maybe more so than you ever realized. But the most important thing is just care. Like, all we got to, care wherever you're at in this, if you're in the shop, the field, the office, all we got to do is care a little bit more. Like, instead of doing all this fighting, sub versus GC, field versus shop, field versus office, what? We're just all trying to accomplish the same thing. But what gets in the way is the insecurities, the ego, the pride, the brokenness, where if we just communicate a little bit more, and care. Leaders need to care. If you're a leader, you need to step up and care more for your people, genuinely. Not because you have a hidden agenda of things to get out of it, but just because it's the right thing to do. That's how we chip away and attack at getting those stats down.
Yeah, a leader that cares. I mean, I would go beyond just that it's the right thing to do, and I would go as far as saying that you're going to get improved results.
Yes. If they love what they do or where they do it, like, what's your litmus test? Are you I like to think, if I'm a fly on the wall of any of my teammates here's dinner table, are they cussing the company out?
Yeah.
Are they demotivated, or are they motivated? And are they motivated? Maybe not by the widget, right? So, like, glazing's just what we nerd out on. It's the widget I know the best. That widget is just the vehicle we use to go achieve our purpose. That's what we use. We know it well. We're continuing to improve. I've learned a ton. I got a ton more to learn in this business. But that's the vehicle. getting hung up on the widget, that's only half the story. You got to use it and understand like there's a huge human element to this that needs a lot of focus, care, and attention.
Yeah, and you talking about caring and understanding. Before Glazier Nation podcast, I had started a little podcast. It was called The Glazing Guru, and I'm just reflecting on a guest I had, a coworker. Shout out to Michelle Pearson, and I asked her what she would change if she could change one thing about the industry, and her answer was compassion. And I think that resonates with what you're saying is. And listen, we're two guys sitting here in our chairs with microphones, talking about a massive industry with massive problems and just thinking you can wave a magic wand. And that's not true.
No.
It's bigger than that. And I'm not the person that knows the first step of changing that. But as one human being, I can try to be more compassionate. I can try to be more understanding when, you're on the phone, or you're sending emails, or you're on a job site, all of the above.
Yeah, it's just minor reframes. So to the whole step thing, just take a step. That's the path there. And I know that's kind of cliche with all categories of life, but that's the way we chip away at this thing. There isn't a magic wand. It's one person at a time. And that's been our metric for years on the podcast. If we get one person that says, man, this met me where I was at, we won. Daily motivation emails that I send out, if I got one person that replied that was like, this is what I'm going through, it's like you were talking to me, won. And it's not I won for my ego, it's that person's positively impacted. And for me, that is the fuel to my tank to keep me pushing. Because I have to build up my capacity so I can do these things. I'm touching a lot of different things, but they're all central to that sun of my solar system of building an army of mountain movers because it's that important to me. I obsess on it. I care deeply about it. Where I can start getting kind of sideways is if I'm not paying enough attention at home. It's not just work. That needs to be all spheres of life. And I had that wrong for a while, which we can either get into. I told you before we record, I'll only throw myself under the bus. And here we are throwing myself under the bus again. But
I think that's hard. And I think that compounds the guy we're talking about that's going through some stuff and maybe did something wrong on the job site and he's getting yelled at, or maybe another trade did something wrong. It wasn't even his fault. And then you also have to have the energy to go home and be a husband and a father. And, I see these things all the time where it's like a social media post or something, and it's a block of text, and it's like, me making time to provide for my family, be a good husband, be a good father, teach my kids this, find time for myself to read. It's a laundry list of things that can get overwhelming. And to your point of one step at a time, I get caught up in a little bit of like, I guess it's like a decision paralysis, right? You've got an idea and you end up not doing it, or you're going to fix something and you end up putting it off for 6 months because the task, all of the steps just seem, or if I want to put it in your language, the peak of the mountain is too high, right? But like you don't get to the peak by a jump, right? It's right. One process at a time. So, what tasks can I achieve today to get me closer to that peak, right?
That's right. And just trying to shift your perspective. Like I was extremely selfish, full of ego and pride that I still battle to this day of the ego and pride thing. And I have self-reflection questions of that. Is this about me or is this about the purpose? And I have to ask those self-reflective questions, but I also need to do that before a meeting. I need to do that before a speech. I need to do that before this podcast. Like before we get on this podcast, remind myself this ain't about me. This is about the mission, right? You're on a mission. I'm on a mission. My mission's that power of one, somebody listening. But you start reframing your brain, because I used to never do that. I would just always be, all right, I got a podcast with John today. What am I going to get out of it? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And you start changing that, even if it feels fake at first, right? Like, because your heart hasn't changed yet. So you got to put some selfless reps in and think like, I'm going to go in this meeting and figure out how I can add value to the person. And it might feel completely unauthentic and just like you're lying. But like sometimes you got to put those reps in to kind of change your heart. And the beautiful thing about it over time is it starts becoming selfish to do selfless things because it brings you such joy, like connecting two people together when you get nothing out of it, or when somebody has a need and you know you can meet that need. And man, there's no better feeling than that. And it far outpunts the selfish pursuits that we have of money and position, power, because all that at the end of the day, we can't take it with us. But man, the ripples of impact we make to others is forever. You don't know if I impact you today and you impact another person, it's forever, but it never stops. That money in your bank account stays here. That title on your business card stays here. But how you treat somebody, that could be positive or negative, that has forever impact. So there's big things at stake.
Hey, let me connect the dots back to where we were at the beginning of this conversation of how this started, right? So it started as a phrase, it started as a saying. Now it's a contract glazing company, plus. When did you start adding to that? Is it after the 2014 stuff? Is that, when's the podcast start? When's the book start? When's the speaking start?
Oh yeah, well, much after that. I had a lot of healing to do before I could help others. I would say the first thing in the mountain mover journey to come on board was those daily emails. And timeline that, I would say it's about 2016. And so there was years of that and just using it in my nomenclature, and people would say it back and all that sort of stuff, and just became second nature. For
Kevin, while you're doing this 2016-ish, while you're doing this, you're working for a contract glazing company?
Yeah, at that time, I think the catalyst to it was I became director of pre-construction for a glazing company, and we had offices in 3 different states, and I had pre-con folks in each one of those states. And I'm like, man, I just want something that's consistent that can connect us. And it would just be like a quote from an author, a quote from a leader, and just go win the day. And it was just something that just hopefully connected us over time. So that started, I don't know, call it 2016. I think that's about right, because it's been about 8 years. But man, you got 2016 all the way to 2020 where that was the only thing. It just was growing and growing and growing. And then in 2020, somebody challenged me that's on that daily motivation list, like, what's next? You need to level up. What are you going to do? And that person became my co-host of the podcast, because I was like, well, you need to level up. Like, what are you doing? And so we just took that leap of faith. 4 years ago, I don't think there were nearly as many podcasts as there are today. And we didn't know what the heck we were doing. And the mission was very similar to the mission, the sun of my solar system is, let's just positively impact people in the industry. And so 2020 was that next step of the mountain mover journey, which the name 1720 became alive. And so we start every podcast, What's Up, Mountain Movers, and just try to help people and showcase this industry just like y'all are doing with Glazier Nation. And so that was 2020. And then I believe it's last year that the mountain mover, probably late 2022, when Mountain Mover Army starts. So there's a website, mountainmoverarmy.com, and that's where the book is, and that's where the speaking and all that began. And quite honestly, a lot of that was to bridge a gap between leaving the company I was working for and day one of this business that I had pinned for October of 2023.
Okay. So one year of Mountain Movers Facades, how's it going?
It's awesome. I'm working with amazing people. The industry has responded in such a profound way. I know faith is in the name, so I know God's hand is in this. And there's you have these white glove clients that you've had for a long time, and you feel like they're going to be the ones that absolutely show up first. But man, there's been other folks that just through the industry know our heart, know our mission, share our heart and mission. And there's this immediate, very high level of trust where they want to do work together. And so, man, our client list is pretty darn diverse with like-minded folks that just know that we're a phone call away, know that we're going to be proactive, know that we have a heart to serve. And that seems to be going a long way. you have the plan that you drafted up versus reality. And so this year has been a little tough with jobs pushing. So I have a beautiful WIP, right? Work in progress sheet, but some of those jobs have slipped substantially. And when you're in your first year with all this fixed overhead, you're like, oh boy. I see how that is more impactful at the start, but that's a tale as old as time. That one's never started. So I've seen some of your social media content. Your team seems like a team of very like-minded individuals. How did you guys connect? Through the years, through my career. So, there's people as far back as 12 years I've been working with together, all the way till we just hired our newest mountain mover that doesn't know how weird we actually are. Well, now he does because he's a month in. But we kind of started cheating because we know each other, and we were able to hit the ground running. And you have this blank canvas of, what do you stand for? Why do we stand for it? That's the biggest reason why we exist. But then digging in, what are our processes going to look like? How do we make this better to serve the industry and serve our clients? What are going to be our standardizations that really help and add value? And just implement those and just know why we're fighting has been a big deal. And it's just with each one of the guys that work here, be weird is our first core value. And then it's followed by effort and consistency, because I told you earlier, those are an absolute force multiplier. But each one of these guys I got to see from the day I met them to fully blossomed in an environment that allows them to be themselves, how weird they actually are. And, some are going to be weird, and some quietly blossom. They're like the stealth assassin weirdos. But you get all these people together in our shop, in our field, in our office, it's a definite weird fest. And so we look forward to the opportunity of bringing more people into this environment. And, glazing might not even be on their radar. They might not know what it is. But man, hopefully when we get our arms wrapped around them, they want to stay forever. And that's the goal.
You mentioned why we're fighting. What's the why for mountain movers?
Our why is building an army of mountain movers. So that is literally our purpose statement. And then our vision is to use glazing as our vehicle to radically impact the lives of the people in our company, industry, and community. And, people in our company first, right? That is so important to me. And when you take this leap of faith to do all the personal guarantees and put it on the line to start the business, you got some unknowns, right? Will our manufacturing teams and field teams want to come on board? Do they believe in this to the level that we do? And man, I've had so many people reach out that say they want to work here and don't even talk about money. They're like, please let me know when we can come over, and making sure that we're continuing to hire people that fit that mold. And, especially in the field, trying to create our own culture within a culture, because that's not fully within our control on certain job sites. But, if it gets too rough, they could call me and I'll go out to that job site and have the tough conversations on their behalf. But level of care with our own people, that's super important to me. And if I don't want a talented person that doesn't treat people with respect. I don't care if they're the most talented person in the industry. I don't want them. I want people that care. I want people
You've danced around one of my favorite quotes with your effort and consistency, and what you just said about talent is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
That's right. And when that talent has an ego on it.
Yeah. Now, if you get hardworking talent, that's different. But I preach that to my kids and the kids that I coach all the time is, put in the reps, give me 1,000 miles per hour between the lines, and you're going to beat that kid that's intimidating you or that kid that you think is better than you. You will eventually beat that person. Oh yeah. So I love all that. Hey, I think you kind of answered this, because let me throw it out there. A guy or a girl's out there and they want to open their own glazing contract company. And I've asked different guests this, but I think your answer is going to be a little different. What's the key to success? What does this person need to do? What is the specific thing this person needs to do to make it successful?
I mean, it's going to feel like a Simon Sinek ripoff, but you got to start with why you're doing it. Why? Is it freedom of hours? Because that ain't that ain't what it looks like in the first few years. Is it financial success? Find a bigger why. Because again, to the possessions and the treasures that we have, there's always more. You'll never be satisfied. If you have a purpose that is worth the obsession, worth the hard work, worth the sacrifice that it takes to get there, then couple that with hard work, consistency, and time. Don't just jump into an opportunity. These things, good things take time to bake. Like your analogy with the kiddos you're coaching, like give it some time to marinate. I've thought about this opportunity for a long time before we hit play on it.
Yeah.
And that's very hard for me because my personality profile is pedal to the metal, all the way, 100%. Let's go. I'll figure out the rest later. And that's not a sound plan when you're putting a lot on the line to start your own deal. And if you don't have solid answers to those questions, there's nothing wrong with not starting a company. You just might need to be a part of something that has structure and that has the right environment where you can be successful, because it's not for everyone, man. That there's a lot of, I try to compartmentalize things and reflect and pray and all that sort of stuff, but there are days that I'm wide-eyed, man, because things aren't going our way, and it takes a toll on you. It could be extremely stressful. And, if I was to do this 5 years ago and not working through the struggles that I've had with my family and not prioritizing them, like starting a business can crumble your family, because your family is your place of comfort most typically. And that's where your guard's down, and, they typically get your scraps. And so if you have it all on the line and you don't know how you're going to make payroll and all these things are happening, man, you might have a pretty tough environment if you haven't learned that your family comes before work, even if work is, in startup mode. And cash is super important. Make sure you understand how cash moves, how money actually flows in a business, and be very proactive at it. It's a lot to take on, especially if you're going to do the subcontracting route when you're talking about a manufacturing arm, an installation arm, resources. You can't time this stuff. We sold a job the first month of our existence that said we're going to mobilize in March. Well, we're sitting here August 12th and we still haven't mobilized on that job.
Yeah.
You make decisions based on the best information that you have, but that information might not be accurate. It might be their truth in the moment, but if you've been in the industry long enough, schedules slide.
Yeah.
And schedules seem to be sliding even further now. So it's a juggling act.
That's also a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Construction schedules are, you put it correctly. You make the best choice you can, and it's important. This is another one I preach, is you cannot confuse the outcome with the decision. You can't then say I should have done this when you at the time made the best decision that you could.
That's wise.
Don't confuse the outcome with the decision. The other thing you got in there about finding your why, right? And I heard some other speakers say that one too, but it's important and I like it. And it's, I think, not just for your own success as someone starting a glass shop or any business, right? To keep you motivated, but I think it's also going to help you approach your employees, your business to business relationships with a different, we've kind of touched on compassion or humanism. Like you're gonna approach it differently if there's some sort of reason that you're doing this, as opposed to just I'm trying to stack dollars.
Yes, yeah, because you're going to get humbled and make some maybe not so great decisions when that's your number one. Before you answer the question, why should this company exist? You might, if you're hollow there, that's okay. Life's a journey. Some people find that in their 20s, 30s, 60s. Yeah, sure. It finds you at the right time. You might need to ask why you exist. Like, forget the company, but why are you here? What is your purpose on this earth? What are you called to do? And man, if you're trying to make something work that isn't your calling, you're going to be tough sledding, even if it's your own business, if you're not called to do it. And so before you can answer that question of like, why should the company exist? Like, why do you exist? Which I know that's getting pretty deep, but It's a question I had to wrestle for a long time. I didn't fully figure it out till just a few years ago. I saw pieces of it and symptoms, and kind of like the Mountain Mover brand, it's continuing to build. But now it's forged in steel. Like I know, like there's no rock in it. I know what it is, and that took a lot of life experience, the good and the bad, to get there. And now I've just parlayed why I exist, why we exist. Those two things are identical.
So I think I'm going to take that. Why do we exist? And I'm going to shelf that for when you come back to the podcast for another time.
Yeah, we could go for like 6 hours.
That's probably another hour. And Kevin, I'm going to let you go, man. That was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it, man.
Of course, man. Have a good one.